President Xi and I, together with President Putin of Russia, will start talking about a meaningful halt to what has become a major and uncontrollable arms race. The U.S. spent $716 billion this year. Crazy. So can the three world leaders reach an agreement? Here now to react is Peter Brookes, Heritage Foundation Senior Fellow and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. Let's start with the ideas that these are the three players that should be sitting at the table. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think the president, Melissa, is talking about the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which is a 1987 treaty between Mikhail Gorbachev, President Reagan, and, of course, it would have been Vice President George H.W. Bush as well. And this is being violated by the Russians in Europe. They're violating this treaty with a new cruise missile. And the Chinese are not part of that treaty. So the Chinese have 2,000 ballistic and cruise missiles in Asia that we can't have similar weapon systems to oppose. So that's what he's getting at. But that's what this is the INF treaty that the United States has talked about getting out of recently.
But it sounds like, I mean, we're the ones that are on the short side of this treaty. What incentive do the Chinese and the Russians have to sit down if the Russians are already ignoring it and the Chinese aren't part of it?
Well, I think the Russians are concerned that the United States will deploy similar missiles in Europe or start an arms race with them that the Russians can ill afford. As you know, the Russian economy is pretty anemic. What are we talking about? 1% growth. They've had to decrease defense spending. I don't think they want to do that. They didn't do well during the Cold War when they tried to have an arms race with the United States, so I don't think they want to do it. The Chinese are much tougher. They're not part of this treaty. They've developed an asymmetric capability out there in the Pacific with these cruise and ballistic missiles that we don't have, and they're not going to want to join. But I think the president is saying, look, if you don't come to the table and talk to us about this, we're going to do things that you may not like.
I also want to get your take on the reports that Iran test-fired a ballistic missile capable of hitting parts of Europe and also the Middle East. What are they violating by doing this, if anything? I mean, isn't this one of these workarounds that they have that they can test the missiles, but they're supposedly not part of, a nuclear program?
Well, look, they're violating UN Security Council Resolution 2231, which says they can't do this testing. The Iranians are saying this is defensive on our part, and we can do this. The problem is that it can reach all of the Middle East and parts of Europe. So they're significant challenges here with the Iranians. They continue to do this. They've not stopped. They said, you got out of the nuclear program or the nuclear agreement. We're going to do this with the missiles. So this could be some sort of trying to put a pressure on us to come to some sort of agreement over the nuclear program, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which the administration has gotten out of and wants to make sure that any new agreement includes Iranian testing of ballistic missiles.
This may seem like a silly question, but isn't this the UN's to do if they're violating a UN Security Council resolution? Aren't they the ones that are supposed to be responding full force to this?
Melissa, one of the problems with the UN is that it has no enforcement mechanisms, does it? Unless the countries agree with what the UN is going to do. It has no army. It has no economic system. So what you have to have when the UN has an agreement is you have to have the member states support it. And yes, there are sanctions on Iran over their nuclear program, and they can go back to the UN to get other members to put additional sanctions on Iran over their missile program. The challenge is getting them to do it. Iran is looking for friends wherever it can get it. The Russians are partners of Iran. The Chinese are happy to be friendly with the Iranians. So to get them to support this can be a real diplomatic challenge.
Peter Brookes, always great. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.